I saw it by accident, one tiny red blink in the corner above the stall door. My breath caught in my chest like someone had squeezed all the air out of the room. I stood there frozen, palms sweating, staring up at a pinhole lens nobody had warned us about. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, suddenly too bright, too loud. I whispered to myself, "No way, this can't be real," but my hands were already shaking as I reached for my phone. If I didn't record this right now, they'd probably say I was making it up. My finger hovered over the camera button, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. I pressed record and aimed my phone at that tiny black dot embedded in the ceiling tile. The red light blinked again, almost like it was mocking me. Like it knew I'd found it and didn't care. I filmed for 30 seconds, zoomed in as close as I could, then stuffed my phone back in my pocket. My legs felt weak as I rushed out of that bathroom, trying not to look as panicked as I felt. That little red blink wouldn't leave my mind. I went straight to the facilities department, practically running down the hallway. The guy at the desk barely looked up from his computer. "You need to talk to HR about that," he said, pointing toward the third floor like he'd heard this complaint 100 times before. So I marched upstairs, my shoes squeaking on the polished tile, and found myself standing outside Kailani's office. She was the head of human resources, always dressed perfectly with her hair pulled back tight. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner, and something else I couldn't name, maybe just corporate indifference. I showed her the video on my phone, my hands still trembling. Kailani adjusted her glasses, clicked her pen 3 times, and said in this calm voice, "It's a temporary measure. We've had some theft issues." My stomach dropped. Who steals stuff in a bathroom? That didn't make any sense. I asked her if this was even legal, and she leaned forward with this practiced sympathy face. "It came from the top," she said softly, "for Mr. Aldridge himself." The way she said his name made it sound like that was supposed to end the conversation. Mr. Aldridge called me into his office the next morning. He was our department director, the kind of man who wore expensive suits and smiled too much when he wanted something. He sat behind his massive desk with his hands folded, looking completely unbothered. "I understand you have concerns," he said, like I was complaining about the coffee machine. He called it proactive security, and insisted the cameras only faced common areas. I'd literally filmed one pointed straight at the stalls. He slid a corporate memo across his desk, neat, official-looking, stamped with company logos, as if a piece of paper could erase the creepy feeling crawling under my skin. I asked if he'd told anyone, posted signs, gotten our consent. He just smiled, way too calm, and said, "Trust me. You'll understand when the data helps us solve problems." Data. He called footage of us in the bathroom data. I felt sick. I nodded like I believed him, thanked him for his time, and walked out of his office with my jaw clenched tight. He had no idea what he'd just started. During my lunch break, I slipped into the supply room with my phone flashlight and about 10 seconds of courage before my nerves failed. I moved boxes of printer paper and toner cartridges aside, digging through the shelves. That's when I found them. 2 small cardboard boxes shoved behind a stack of cable ties. Same brand as the camera lens I'd filmed upstairs. My hands were shaking as I pulled one box forward. A purchase order was stuck to the side, with a magnet showing 3 signatures and a delivery date from 2 weeks ago. Someone had tried to hide these in plain sight, hoping nobody would go looking. I took photos of everything, the boxes, the purchase order, the part numbers. My phone camera clicked quietly in the dim storage room. Then I noticed something else, a handwritten sticky note on the side of one box that said, "Install before Monday." That was 4 days ago. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned. I carefully put everything back exactly how I'd found it, and slipped out, checking over my shoulder the whole way. I was washing my hands in the bathroom sink later that afternoon, trying to rinse away the nauseous feeling that had settled in my stomach. Nadia from accounting walked in and immediately noticed something was wrong. She touched my elbow gently and asked if I was okay. I don't know why I told her. Maybe because I was desperate to know I wasn't crazy, but the words just spilled out. Her face went pale as I explained what I'd found. I felt like someone was watching me for weeks, she whispered, glancing up at the ceiling. I thought I was being paranoid. We stood there in that bathroom, two women suddenly aware of how vulnerable we'd been made to feel in what should have been a private space. Within an hour, 3 more women from different departments had quietly approached me in the break room. Each one had a different story, but they all ended the same way. An uncomfortable feeling they couldn't shake, a sense of being observed, instincts they'd learned to doubt. We weren't paranoid. We were being gaslit. Right there, standing in a circle by the coffee maker, we made a pact. We'd meet after work and compare everything we knew. We gathered in a quiet corner of the parking garage after everyone else had left for the day. The overhead lights flickered and our voices echoed off the concrete walls. I airdropped the video to everyone's phones while they shared what they'd noticed. Weird maintenance schedules, blocked off time slots on the facility's calendar, mysterious equipment checks that nobody explained. Then Omar from the IT department showed up, his jaw tight with anger. He'd been asked to whitelist some new network endpoints without any explanation of what they were for. I thought it was weird, he said, but my supervisor told me not to ask questions. He pulled out his laptop right there in the parking garage and started running network scans. If these cameras are streaming off-site, he said, typing fast, this is way bigger than we think. The evening air felt colder than it should have. We all stood there, breath visible in the dim light, realizing we'd stumbled onto something that could explode. Omar looked up from his screen. I'll help you, he said quietly, but you have to promise to protect me when this blows up. That night, I couldn't even brush my teeth without checking the ceiling of my own bathroom. I kept imagining strangers somewhere scrolling through footage of me, pausing, rewinding, watching my private moments like I was some kind of reality show they could control with a remote. I'd never felt small in my own body until someone tried to turn it into something they could study and catalog. Standing in front of my mirror, I looked myself in the eyes and said out loud, I am not crazy. This is real. This is wrong. My voice sounded stronger than I felt, but saying the words helped somehow. My hands were still shaking, though. The fear sat in my chest like a rock I couldn't swallow. I thought about calling my mom, but what would I even say? How do you explain that your workplace makes you feel violated in the one place that should be completely private? I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I'd saved months ago and prayed I'd never need. A lawyer a friend had recommended. I texted before I could talk myself out of it. Mr. Quinn's office was small but felt safe somehow, with law books lining the walls and certificates framed behind his desk. He listened to my story without interrupting once, his pen moving steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he asked for everything I had. The video, photos of the purchase order, screenshots of the memo, timestamps, all of it. I sent the files to his email right there while he watched. Do not confront Mr. Aldridge alone again, he said firmly, looking me straight in the eye. From this point forward, everything needs to be documented and escalated strategically. His seriousness made my stomach flip. This was really happening. I asked the question I'd been too scared to say out loud. Is this actually a crime? Mr. Quinn nodded slowly, and I felt a strange mix of relief and terror wash over me. Relief because I wasn't overreacting. Terror because that meant we were up against something bigger than I'd imagined. He pulled out his business card holder and wrote 2 numbers on the back. This is a detective I trust, he said, and this is a journalist whose investigations have changed laws. He slid the card across his desk. You're going to need both. I decided to run a test. The next morning at work, I went into the bathroom with a bright yellow sticky note and a black marker. I wrote, Hey camera, blink twice if you're illegal, and stuck it right on the stall door where the lens was aimed. It was ridiculous, maybe even childish, but I needed to know if someone was actively monitoring these feeds. I went back to my desk and tried to focus on work, but my eyes kept flicking to the clock. At lunch, I returned to that bathroom with my heart in my throat. The sticky note was gone, completely gone. And when I looked up at the corner where the camera had been, the tiny black lens had vanished too. Someone had scrambled to remove the evidence the second they saw my note. I stood there staring at the blank ceiling tile, And despite everything, I almost smiled. They were panicking. That meant we were getting close. I pulled out my phone and texted Omar. Check the network. I think they just took one offline. His response came 30 seconds later. 2 devices dropped off at 12:43. I have their IDs. We had them. We weren't done testing. Nadia and I moved our operation to a second bathroom on the other side of the building. One that was used less often, but we suspected had cameras too. Nadia propped the door open and accidentally left her security badge on the counter with a folded note tucked underneath. The note said, "Meet me in the stairwell at 3 p.m. I have proof about the cameras." It was bait, pure and simple. We watched from behind a tall plant in the lobby, our phones ready to record, trying to look casual while our hearts raced. We didn't have to wait long. At 2:47 p.m., Mr. Aldridge walked past the reception desk with purpose in his stride. He didn't go to his office. He didn't stop to talk to anyone. He headed straight for that second bathroom like he knew exactly what he was looking for. Omar was tracking his security badge in real time from his desk, sending us updates. He just entered the west corridor. He's at the bathroom door. He's inside. We watched through the lobby camera feed Omar had pulled up on his phone. When Mr. Aldridge came out 4 minutes later, he was carrying something small wrapped in paper towels, gripping it tight in his fist like contraband. Omar had pulled the security footage before Mr. Aldridge could think to delete it. We watched the timestamp tick by as he walked into that bathroom at 2:49 and emerged at 2:53, his face caught perfectly by the hallway dome camera. In the still frame Omar captured, you could see the bulge in his fist where he'd wrapped something in paper towels. We sent everything to Mr. Quinn immediately. The video, the timestamps, the screenshot of Mr. Aldridge's face. My phone buzzed with his response. "This is excellent evidence. Don't delete anything." I felt this surge of energy that wasn't quite fear anymore. It was something stronger, something like power. We had him on camera removing his own illegal cameras. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. That afternoon, Kailani from HR sent me a message. "Can you swing by my office when you have a minute?" Her tone was friendly, casual even, but my stomach sank. I knew what was coming. When I walked into the HR conference room 10 minutes later, there was already a document sitting on the table, paper-clipped and official-looking. An NDA. They were trying to buy my silence before I could go any further. Kailani slid the document toward me with a practiced smile. "Let's avoid any misunderstandings," she said, like we were discussing a simple miscommunication about vacation days. The paper outlined a cash settlement. They called it compensation for emotional distress. But it was contingent on complete silence. I couldn't talk to the press, couldn't file complaints with government agencies, couldn't even discuss what happened with other employees. It felt like someone offering you a coat while your house burned down behind you. Polite, useless, and deeply insulting. I read through the clauses, each one designed to trap me into erasing my own experience. My hands stayed steady on the table. I didn't sign. I didn't argue. I just smiled the way you smile when you finally understand all the rules of a game you didn't know you were playing. "Can I take this home to review?" I asked, my voice calm and clear. Kailani looked relieved, like she thought I was actually considering it. "Of course," she said. "Take your time." I folded the document carefully, slipped it into my bag, and walked straight out of that building to Mr. Quinn's office. He read through it in silence, then circled 3 clauses with his red pen. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "is their panic letter." My phone rang at 6 in the morning, jolting me awake. The number was local but unfamiliar. I answered anyway, my voice rough with sleep. "This is Tessa Monroe from the Herald," a woman said, crisp and professional. "I understand you have information about workplace surveillance." My heart started racing. Mr. Quinn must have reached out to her. For the next 40 minutes, I sat on my couch in my pajamas answering her questions. She was surgical, specific, detailed, impossible to fool. "Can you confirm the device make and model? Do you have corroborating witnesses who saw the cameras? Who approved the purchase order?" Every answer I gave seemed to unlock another question. She already knew more than I expected. By the time the sun came up, painting my living room orange, Tessa had verified my story with 2 former employees who'd left the company months ago. They'd seen the same things, felt the same discomfort, but had been too scared to speak up. "This isn't isolated," Tessa said. "This is a pattern." Those words hit me like electricity. We weren't alone. This had been happening for who knows how long. "We can run the story as soon as you file with the police," Tessa said. "That's when the real pressure starts." I walked into the police precinct at 9 in the morning with a folder so stuffed with evidence I could barely keep it closed. The officer at the front desk directed me to Detective Briggs, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes and a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest detective." She listened while I explained everything, her pen moving steadily across her notepad. I handed over printed photos of the cameras, screenshots of the purchase order, timestamps of when devices went offline, Omar's network logs showing the MAC addresses. Everything. Detective Briggs didn't ask if I was sure about what I'd seen. She didn't suggest I was overreacting. She just said, "This is enough to start an investigation." And I felt a month's worth of tension release from my shoulders in one long breath. She promised to get a warrant for the company's server records, to see what footage had been stored and who had accessed it. I signed my statement, my hand cramping from her gripping the pen too tight. That afternoon, I got a text from Nadia. The company just announced a routine security audit, effective immediately. They knew. They knew we'd gone to the police, and now they were scrambling. I learned what they were calling me before anyone had the decency to warn me. The rumor spread through the office like a virus. I'd faked the footage to extort money from the company. Someone had gone through my social media, screenshot old posts, and twisted them to make it look like I had some kind of vendetta against Mr. Aldridge. Comments I'd made months ago about workplace frustrations were suddenly being used as evidence of my unstable behavior. People I'd eaten lunch with for years wouldn't make eye contact with me in the hallway. Coworkers who'd smiled and waved last week now turned away when I walked by. It stung worse than I'd expected, right in the spot where I thought I'd built up armor against this kind of thing. I wanted to scream at all of them, shake them, make them see the truth. But instead, I went to the bathroom, a different one this time, one I hoped was safe, and locked myself in a stall. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from Omar. He'd found something in a temporary directory that hadn't been properly deleted. A folder. The name made my blood run cold. Restroom test. Omar sent me the folder contents, and I opened the files with shaking hands. Inside were installation guides, technical specs, and timestamps showing exactly when each camera had been activated. But the worst part was a video clip, a recording of a Zoom meeting I'd never been invited to. In it, Mr. Aldridge was talking to someone off-screen, gesturing with his hands, clearly excited. "The behavioral analytics are fascinating," he was saying. "We can track patterns, peak usage times, even stress indicators based on how long people spend in the stalls." My stomach turned. This wasn't about theft. It wasn't about security. It was about studying us like we were lab rats in some twisted experiment. He talked about data points and optimization opportunities like we weren't real people, like our privacy was just an obstacle to his research project. I called Mr. Quinn immediately, my voice shaking so hard I could barely speak. When I played him the audio, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We're filing an emergency injunction to prevent them from destroying evidence." His voice had this edge to it I hadn't heard before, controlled fury. By that evening, a judge had granted the order. The warrants came early, before most employees arrived for work. I sat in my car across the street, coffee growing cold in my cup holder, watching as police and investigators in windbreakers marked digital forensics, rolled server equipment out through the front doors on metal carts. They worked quickly, efficiently, like they'd done this 100 times before. Mr. Aldridge stood in the lobby, visible through the glass walls, his arms folded across his chest and his jaw working like he was chewing on glass. Security guards hovered nearby, unsure whether they were supposed to help or stay out of the way. I watched other employees arrive, confused, standing in clusters on the sidewalk with their visitor badges still in hand. Some of them pulled out their phones to film. When I finally walked past the lobby to get to my desk, Mr. Aldridge was still standing there. He didn't look at me. I made sure not to look away. Let him see me. Let him know I wasn't backing down. At noon, Tessa's story went live on the Herald's website. By 12:07, the parking lot was swarming with news vans and reporters holding microphones. The legal kind of cameras this time. My phone lit up with a message that made my hands go numb. Locker room. Now. It was from Nadia. I practically ran down the stairs, my heart hammering. She was standing in the women's locker room, pale and shaking, pointing up at a ceiling vent. I grabbed a chair and climbed up to look. There it was, another tiny camera, tucked behind the metal grating, its lens aimed right at the changing area. I felt rage burn through me so hot I stopped feeling my hands. This wasn't some rogue experiment by one paranoid manager. This was an entire system. A network of surveillance that had been watching us in our most vulnerable moments. The locker room fell silent, except for the hum of the ventilation system. Other women started checking their phones, and within minutes, news spread through the building. A former intern reached out to Tessa directly with her own story. She'd been asked to sign something called a wellness monitoring agreement during her first week 3 months ago. She hadn't understood what it meant, but the language had talked about comprehensive safety measures. We'd all been lied to. How many others had signed paperwork without realizing what they were consenting to? An emergency board meeting was called for that evening. We weren't invited, but details leaked almost immediately. Someone inside was feeding information to reporters. A leaked agenda mentioned third-party vendor liability and referenced a contractor with a private email domain that wasn't the company's usual tech providers. Omar ran a background check on the domain registration and swore under his breath when the results loaded. The vendor's business address matched a residential property owned by someone with the same last name as one of the board members. It all clicked into place like a lock turning. This wasn't just Mr. Aldridge being careless or overzealous about security. This was planned, coordinated, maybe even profitable. Someone was getting paid to install these systems. Someone stood to benefit from all this behavioral data. The connections were too close, too convenient. By evening, the board issued a carefully worded statement saying Mr. Aldridge had been suspended pending the outcome of an independent investigation. An hour later, Mr. Aldridge responded by having security escort me to HR. They were firing me, and they weren't even trying to hide the retaliation anymore. 2 security guards met me at my desk with an empty cardboard box. "We need you to pack your personal items," one of them said, not unkindly. He looked uncomfortable, like he knew this was wrong, but didn't have a choice. I didn't argue. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, pressed record, and held it up so everyone in the office could see what was happening. My voice was steady when I spoke, aimed at the phone's microphone, but loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "My name is Naeem. I reported illegal surveillance cameras in the workplace bathrooms. I cooperated with law enforcement, and now I'm being escorted out of the building for doing the right thing." The security guard closest to me shifted his weight, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quiet I almost didn't catch it. I wasn't sorry, not anymore. I packed my few personal items, a coffee mug, a plant, some photos, and let them walk me through the lobby. Every step felt like power, not shame. By the time I reached the sidewalk, Tessa had already published a follow-up article. The headline used the exact word we'd been starving for: retaliation. The company tried to fight back with a carefully crafted statement about protecting company property and addressing misinterpretations of standard security protocols. Then someone, we never found out who, posted a short video clip to a burner social media account clearly designed to smear me. The footage was blurry, taken out of context, edited to make it look like I was doing something suspicious in a storage room. It was obviously meant to discredit me, to make people think I'd been stealing or planting evidence. But Mr. Quinn called me 30 minutes after it was posted, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Look at the file metadata," he said. I pulled up the video on my laptop and checked the properties. There it was, embedded in the code. A digital watermark pointing back to the company's cloud storage system. "That's custodial possession," Quinn explained. "They just proved they had access to surveillance footage and used it to retaliate against a whistleblower." I had to sit down from the relief of having mathematics and digital forensics on my side. Evidence doesn't lie, even when people do. Detective Briggs confirmed it that evening. The video's origin had been traced back to an internal administrator account. They'd dug their own grave trying to bury me. After that, witnesses started coming forward like a dam had broken. A night custodian called the police tip line to report he'd been asked to do special maintenance in the bathrooms after hours and had wondered why at the time. A contractor who'd worked on the building 2 months ago produced emails from Mr. Aldridge's assistant requesting discreet camera placement near mirrors and stall dividers. Each new piece of evidence was another thread pulled from a sweater, and we were watching the whole thing unravel. 2 people resigned in the same afternoon, the head of facilities and someone senior in HR. Their departure emails were vague, citing personal reasons, but everyone knew why they were running. They'd been part of it, whether through direct involvement or willful ignorance. I stopped hiding when I walked into rooms. I held my head up in the grocery store when former coworkers pretended not to see me. I answered my phone when reporters called. Detective Briggs reached out with an update that made my hands shake with relief. The district attorney's office was reviewing the case, and formal charges were being drafted. It was really happening. They were going to face consequences. Justice was slow, but it was coming. They tried one last time to make me disappear quietly. A lawyer I'd never met called my phone and introduced himself as representing interested parties who wished to resolve this matter amicably. The settlement offer he described was huge, enough money to buy a new life somewhere else, to never work again if I didn't want to. All I had to do was sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and drop any cooperation with law enforcement or civil litigation. I thought about it, I really did. I thought about sleeping through the night without checking my ceiling. About not flinching every time I walked into a public restroom. About disappearing somewhere quiet, where nobody knew my name or my story. But then I thought about Nadia's shaking hands when she found that second camera. I thought about the intern who'd been tricked into signing away her rights during her first week. I thought about every woman who came after me, who'd walk into that building and deserved to feel safe. I picked up the pen they'd couriered over with the contract, drew a single line through the signature page, and said clearly into my phone, "I'll see you in court." That night, the board of directors fired Mr. Aldridge for cause and announced a comprehensive leadership transition. Mr. Aldridge did the perp walk that no amount of expensive lawyers or public relations consultants could spin away. I watched it happen on the news from my apartment, Nadia and Omar on either side of me on the couch. Camera flashes lit up his face as reporters shouted questions he couldn't answer fast enough to escape. Why the bathrooms? Did you profit from the footage? How many people were recorded? His lawyer tried to shield him with a briefcase, but there was no hiding from this. We sat there with our hands clasped together like we were holding onto a rope that might pull us apart if we let go. It didn't feel like victory exactly. It felt more like finally being able to breathe after holding your breath underwater. Someone on TV called him the bathroom surveillance executive. And I knew that label would follow him forever. The district attorney held a press conference an hour later, standing in front of a wall of microphones, and announced formal charges. Unlawful surveillance, evidence tampering, retaliation against a whistleblower, and 3 more counts still pending as the investigation continued. Each charge carried potential prison time. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages of support, news requests, people sharing their own stories. The settlement came 8 months later, but it wasn't hush money this time. It was the kind that writes new company policies, prints warnings on bathroom doors, and funds training programs about workplace privacy rights. We won back pay, damages for emotional distress, and money for therapy for anyone who needed it. Most importantly, we won the right to talk about what happened. No gag orders, no forced silence. I used my portion of the settlement to start a small nonprofit. We print checklists that help people spot hidden cameras. We provide scripts for reporting surveillance to authorities. We connect victims with lawyers who take these cases seriously. Sometimes I still catch myself scanning ceilings when I walk into public restrooms, my eyes automatically searching corners for that telltale red blink. But the fear doesn't get to write the ending of my story anymore. Mr. Aldridge thought he could watch us without our consent, could make us doubt our own instincts, could buy our silence when we fought back. In the end, the whole world watched him lose everything. And I got to watch myself refuse to disappear, refuse to be quiet, refuse to let fear make me small. That's the victory I'll carry forever.